Hello, friends, and welcome to another Napa Institute conversation. Today, we're joined by our good friend, Rick Santorum, someone I think we all wish was on the screen last night as the winner of the election, but we'll talk about that in 24, Rick, maybe. Big fan of Rick's myself, and I know many of you guys are, and I know we're also very anxious right now. A lot has happened in the last 24 hours, and that's why we have Rick to kind of help us sort this through. I do want to remind everyone, though, the importance of politics, obviously, but Christ is still Lord. The church is still the church. So elections do have consequences, and what happens in the next 24 or 48 hours as we figure out who the president's going to be is going to be important. But it doesn't change our mission. We need to be the Catholics in our nation to heal this great divide. So if you don't mind, Rick, we're going to open in prayer real quick before we get into some question. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord, in a special way today, we ask you to heal the divides that exist both in our nation and in our own hearts. We ask you to send your Spirit down on our broken nation to restore its Christian foundations and to allow us to be beacons of freedom to the world and to be a place where Christianity flourishes so that we can spread your word to the world. Help guide this election and let your will be done in both our lives and in this great nation. Lord, help us to love one another. Amen.
Amen.
Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. So yeah, Rick, as everyone here knows, they went to bed probably late last night. You sound like you stayed up even later, but when we went to bed, we felt like we were in good shape on the Trump side of things, with Michigan and Wisconsin showing sizable leads, but overnight those kind of evaporated, and now there is a razor thin margin for Biden. We're talking about just a few thousand votes in some cases in states like Michigan, Wisconsin, and even Nevada, which wasn't talked about nearly as much. So what's going on there? What's your take on this? And give us a...
Well, let me just give you the holistic thing. First off, it was a remarkable night in the sense that no one in the mainstream media predicted this. The polling was horrendous. We even had conversations on the panel last night, not on air, but off air, that it really leads one to believe that the national pollsters, the mainstream media polls, CBS, NBC, CNN, all of them, Fox, Fox had this as a 10-point Biden win nationally yesterday. That they're either incompetent or there's an element of nefariousness as to what they're trying to do. You want to talk about voter suppression? Putting out national poll after national poll after national poll that is clearly wrong and has been wrong now for 2 cycles. In this case, much worse. I mean, everyone talks about 2016, how the polls were really off. They were not that far off. They were that far off this time. And so there's something that needs to be done there. And by the way, you guys didn't see the exit polls. I got a chance to see them. The 5 o'clock exit polls came out yesterday, and we saw them at CNN. Again, we can't discuss them. We're not allowed to do that. But they had Wisconsin in the exit polls at Biden plus 10. I mean, Biden's going to win it by a few thousand votes. And Biden, to get to where we are today, Biden's going to win Wisconsin. And they have recounts there. It's close enough for a recount, but 4 years ago, there was a recount. I think Trump picked up 300 votes. Recounts don't, unless it's within a handful of votes, they don't change anything. So I believe that Biden will win Wisconsin. I think it's apparent now that he's also going to win Michigan. There's about 100,000 votes left, and almost all of them are from Democratic areas, and so mostly from Detroit. So, and he's behind. The interesting thing about Michigan is that John James is running ahead of Donald Trump. And he's actually, instead of 30,000 votes behind at this point, he's 25,000 votes ahead. And there is a chance that even though there's these 100,000 votes will break for his opponent, there's a chance, and probably heavily, there's a chance he still could eke out a win, which would be a remarkable and wonderful gift to the Republican Party to have John James. If you don't know them, you need to look it up. He's a remarkable man and just a real quality guy. To have him in the United States Senate would be a blessing, in addition to the fact, not just having him, but having that additional Republican senator. We're as bad as the Trump news, I think, will probably be. The the Senate news is actually very encouraging. We are going to be at 52 Republican senators in all likelihood. We're going to lose 2 seats, Arizona and Colorado, but we will pick up Alabama and potentially Michigan. And we had a 3-seat advantage. So we'll either be back to 53 or at 52. And that, I actually sat down on election night, and we all sort of did our predictions around the table. And, my feeling was that Trump was going to lose a very, very close race. But I said, but I think he has done well enough that we can hold the Senate. And frankly, if we can hold the Senate, we stop Biden from doing a lot of really bad things like packing the court and adding DC as a state. So as disheartening as it may be to lose the presidency, and there's a lot of bad things that are going to happen because of that, there is not nearly the kind of drastic consequence to the country. And again, I'm not, I always say I'm not a glass half full guy. I'm a guy that's just happy to have a glass. So my feeling is that, with the election in 2022, we have all sorts of governors up. We have almost as many Republicans up, which was 22 or 23 this time out of 33. We have the similar number this time around. And there'll be a lot of vacancies in key states like Pennsylvania, North Carolina, very competitive states. So actually having Biden as president actually gives us a better chance of holding the United States Senate in 2022 and strengthening our bench by picking up governorships in Pennsylvania and some other very key states that are open states. So I know this is bad news and everybody's feeling bad, but I can tell you that there is a silver lining to this. And the other silver lining, I'm just going to be honest, is the caustic nature of Donald Trump and the corrosive effect that it has on voters that you saw last night are very willing to vote for us. And you look at Latinos, I mean, Hispanics, Trump picked up 6 or 7 points among them versus Hillary Clinton. But I think the opportunity is even greater than that. I mean, Catholics, people who I think were appreciative of Trump's pro-life position, but more importantly, I hate to say that, but I think more importantly, the economic prosperity that he brought to that community and the focus that Donald Trump had, and I think hopefully future Republicans will have, on blue collar working issues and speaking to that community and working deliberately with policies that reach opportunity and the opportunity to rise to lower income Hispanics, African Americans, and other people who are economically disadvantaged. So I know I'm somewhat sounding like we've won, and I know we haven't won, but in many respects, Donald Trump has done a great service to the party by transforming the party in many ways that I think are helpful for us to survive in the future. And not the least of which, oddly enough, is the guy who is accused by the mainstream media of being a xenophobe and all these things. He's actually opened up doors in the African American and Latino community that other Republicans can go through that he can't because of his character. And so I just look at this as to get to the final point, which is, why am I talking like Donald Trump lost the election? He still may win the election. There is a narrow path for Donald Trump to win this election. He can hold on to Georgia, which is going to be very tight. I think he will hold on to North Carolina. And I think there's a good chance he can win Pennsylvania. That still leaves him 3 votes short, assuming, Alaska hasn't been called, but it will be for Trump. So that still leaves him 3 votes short. He's not going to get them in Michigan or Wisconsin, in my opinion, which means the only state that's left is Nevada. Now, if you'd have said to me, we're going to count on Nevada to win the election early on, I would have said, it's probably not a very good bet. The Trump campaign still thinks they can win Arizona. I don't know. Everything I'm hearing from Arizona is that it's just, we're not going to get there. But again, they believe that, so I'm not discounting that, but that's what they're saying. Nevada's interesting. Just one final point. Nevada's interesting in that if Trump wins Nevada, the irony of that would be amazing, because The only reason Trump is competitive in Nevada is because of the coronavirus. And you can say, what? What do you mean? How is he competitive in Nevada because of the coronavirus? He mishandled the coronavirus. Donald Trump is for opening up the economy. And we all know, what is the economy of Nevada? Tourism. And the reason Donald Trump is doing well is because the tourist industry in Nevada is on its back, and they need the country open. And that's why he's doing better. And it's driven largely, interestingly enough, again, by Hispanics who work in the industry, who are blue collar workers in the industry. So again, just look at very odd and strange things. This election is, I know I'm sort of talking probably too long here, but it just tells you how fascinating this election is, how dynamic this election has been. And I think we'll look back at this election, even if we lose, and maybe even more so if we lose, as a launching point for the Republican Party to be a majority party in the future.
Yeah, no, and I do want to ask one brief question about Nevada itself, and that is that not a lot's being talked about Nevada compared to Wisconsin and Michigan. The margin there, last time I checked right before this call, was 8,000 votes, and there's only 67% reporting. Where are those outstanding votes in Nevada?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing in Nevada, is that they're from all over. Now, again, Clark County, which is Las Vegas, and Washoe County, which is Reno, is where Nevada is the most urbanized state in the country. I don't know if people know that, but it is. It's the most urbanized state in the country. You'd think Nevada, it's huge. Yeah, it's 94% federal lands, and so it's not inhabitable land, and so it's a very urbanized area, and so most of the vote is in Clark County. Most of the vote, and then next would be up in the Reno area. But there are votes from all over areas that, and by the way, he's trailing in both, but not by huge margins. I mean, it's not like Detroit or not like Philadelphia, where he's getting 80. Biden's getting 80% of the vote. I think in Clark County, Biden's at 52 or 53, and in Washoe County, it's a similar number. So, depending on where those votes are in Clark County and where they are in these other counties, that's a potential. Here's the only problem with Nevada, and that is predominantly, I'm told, these are absentee votes. And so as we're seeing in Pennsylvania, as they're counting right now, absentee votes in Pennsylvania are running 3-1 against the president. So same thing what's happening in Michigan right now. Why Michigan and Wisconsin went the other way? Because absentee votes have gone decidedly against the president. We all knew that. I mean, we knew that was going to happen, but they've been substantial, and so there's still a chance. The problem is that their absentee votes have not been going our way anywhere, and so to expect them to help us make up a difference in Nevada is probably unlikely. But that's the only path, just by the sheer volume of votes. That's the only path that right now, in my opinion, is available. Yeah.
So bringing us to hot topics this year after the election are going to be polls. As you said, they got it very wrong. I think the polls in Ohio showed a 5-point Biden victory, and Trump won by something like 8. Yeah. So we're talking about a 13-point swing. So the distrust for polls is going to be something we all talk about. But I think one thing you're going to hear a ton about is this mail-in ballots. The opportunity for fraud there. Trump's already using that rhetoric. Why so many mail-in ballots? Is this a good idea in the future? And why, in the case that you see the early voting and the voting in person come in and Trump is highly favored, and in the ballots, Biden, as you said, 3-1. Why is that?
But it was a deliberate strategy on the part of, first off, Trump made his own bed there, because Trump sowed questions about whether mail-in ballots were going to get there, and that there was going to be fraud, and people were throwing away ballots, people in the post. So a friend of mine who's a congressman from Pennsylvania actually did a tweet or some sort of Facebook post or something saying, hey, early voting, absentee voting is available now, and get your absentee ballot. And he got pummeled, saying, what are you doing? Those are, don't encourage that, because people are not going to have their vote counted. So Trump had convinced people, many, that people who mailed in their ballot weren't going to have their votes counted. And so people waited until vote on election day. I'm not sure that's a particularly great strategy. I mean, I think the Democrats were actually smarter. bank the votes when you can get them. I mean, don't, people died between, in October, and people get busy and get called out of town, or, a relative is sick. And so get those votes. If you can get the votes in, get them in. And so I think Trump didn't help himself. As far as fraud and all those other things, like, I do not subscribe to the fact. I mean, if you look at states like Washington State, Utah, I mean, they're basically all mail-in ballots, and they have been. And you can almost make the argument that that the cases of fraud and are just as easy to commit in person as they are by mail. And because we've dealt with this in Philadelphia for years and years and years, where people get bused to the polling place and vote under other people's names, and it's so. Do I like mail-in ballots? No, I hate it. Do I like early voting? No, I don't like it. And the reason I don't like it is because they start too early and they don't let the race play out. I think the race changed from the time that Donald Trump's first debate to the second debate. After this first debate, if people voted after that first debate, any undecided voter was going to go the other way after that first debate, and vice versa. Any undecided voter probably would have gone for Trump after the second one. So I think delaying the vote or early voting would be better, but I have no fundamental objection to absentee voting or mail-in voting.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. You saw that trending on Google, or at least that's what was reported, that how do I change my vote? And you can't.
Yeah. That's the problem with early voting. And as bad it is in the general election, it's worse in primaries, because in primaries, unlike a general election where you have one, or you have a choice of two candidates, in primaries you may have choices of several candidates, and heck, a candidate may drop out or something may happen, and your candidate, particularly in presidential primaries, this happens all the time, where you vote early and your candidate doesn't do well in an earlier primary, and they're not even on the ballot anymore. So those are the kinds of things I think we need to look at as to early voting. But am I concerned from a fraud point of view? No, I don't think there's any higher instance of fraud for mail-in as there is for anything else.
Yeah, I think emotions are really high right now, so people are getting all sorts of accusations. So one last quick question before we jump into more of a global question for you on the party. So we know there's probably going to be some kind of legal fight here, which is the last thing the country needs with it being so divided right now. But how long do you think this plays out? When do you think we have an answer to this election?
Well, the problem is, if Biden wins Michigan and wins Wisconsin and wins Nevada, he's at 270, exactly where he needs to be. So Trump could win everything else, which is Alaska. These are the states that have not been decided: Alaska, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, and the 2nd District of Maine. So if he'd win all of those, it would be 270 to 268. And interestingly enough, Omaha, Nebraska would have decided the race, because Omaha, Nebraska voted for Trump in 2016, but voted for Biden in this election. So you just think about the irony of all that. By the way, think of a better diocese than Omaha, Nebraska. It's a great diocese. Yeah. Yet they voted for Joe Biden. And the interesting thing is that the congressman from the 2nd District won a huge victory. I mean, one going away. So again, it's sort of hard for me to sort of get my head around why Dan Bacon would do so well in the 2nd District as a Republican congressman, and yet we'd lose the district actually pretty badly. So that's sort of, I sort of lost my trail. I got down a rabbit trail there. So
I think you're onto something there too. And why that may happen is I feel like, we've lost the idea of being a traditional conservative or a traditional liberal in our country. And, people are being forced to places that they're uncomfortable, kind of on the outer poles there. And, Trump's rhetoric, for all the great things he's done, especially on family and life, the rhetoric is hard for a lot of us to take.
I think that's probably, my son lives in Omaha. He's in the Air Force there, and I've been to Omaha many, many times, and obviously flew in and out of there because that's the airport you use for Western Iowa, and I spent a little time in Western Iowa, and you know, Midwestern sensibilities can be a fickle thing, and so I think that he did offend a lot. He does offend a lot of people, and that comes back to the overall point, which is 84% of the people in the exit polls last night said that they voted for Donald Trump because of his policies, not his personality or character. Whereas Joe Biden, it was like a third voted for Biden because of who he was, not because of his policies. That, you know, it's, yeah, that tells you that, you know, we left a lot of votes on the table, folks.
Yeah. No, I feel like for us, it's like for somebody who supports maybe Trump's policies but is embarrassed by his behavior. You know, it's kind of drawing that line, and maybe for the party, you know, Trump needed to happen because maybe his personality was the only one who could get in there and blow things up. But at the same time, it was that same personality that helped him in that case that probably hurt him in spots like Omaha. So, long story short, looks like it's a very narrow path, but likely a Biden win. But it's not a total loss because of the Senate, which we need to drive home to people.
And by the way, let me throw one other thing in, which is the House. Yeah. Right now, we're up 5 seats in the House, and no one would have predicted that. There's a chance. I mean, slim, but if I just went through and looked at all of the House races outstanding right now, there's enough House races where we're in play that we could actually take the majority in the House, believe it or not. Now, a bunch of those are in Pennsylvania, 4 of them, where we're leading right now. But that's before the early votes counted in those. No, I shouldn't say all the early vote, but much of the early vote is counted. Some of it is counted, some of it isn't. And so we may not end up winning any of those. But some of them are, you know, the famous seat in Pittsburgh, Connor Lamb. I don't know if you know that name, but that was the special election in the Trump plus 12 district. Where the Democrats won, and this was going to be the beginning of the end, and in 2018, and the beginning of the blue wave, which it turned out to be. Well, Connor Lamb is trailing by 16 points right now, and now could he make it up? Yes, but what I think you're seeing is that in many cases we picked up 2 seats in Miami-Dade, we picked up 2 seats, maybe 3 in New York. And I'd gone that we picked up, I think, a seat in Illinois. So, I mean, we picked up 2 seats in Iowa. So I can keep going down the list. There is a chance for us to pick up quite a few seats this time and have that House margin be much smaller than it is today. And again, I think the likelihood of getting the majority is pretty close to 0. We'd have to have everything go our way. But again, another sign that in an election year that obviously was a pretty divisive election year, Republicans and the message of Republicanism, thanks to Trump pulling out that vote, was one that's popular.
So then one last question for you before I let you go. I know you're really busy. You kind of led right into it there. The future of the party, the future of politics in our nation, not just even one party. You know, I myself find my personal concerns is with the direction of the country. You know, the kind of hatred we have for each other, the lack of civil discourse, that lack of trustworthiness. How do we restore all of that? How do we realign the traditional values of both parties with what's actually out there? Because right now you have this kind of Republican side that's kind of this libertarian or Trump train side, and then you got this kind of socialism side, the traditional conservative and traditional liberal, which there are still a lot of them out there. How do we return to aligning with their values? How do we bring the country back to a point where there's less hatred and less division?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I think Joe Biden won't think this. Certainly Joe Biden's advisors won't, but maybe Joe Biden will, that he got handed a big favor by the Senate staying Republican, and that, you know, he'll quote be frustrated, but he'll have an excuse of the left as to why he's not doing a lot of things that they want him to do, because he can't. And so he has an opportunity, if he wants to. Look, he's a 1-term president at most, And he has an opportunity to be what he says he wants to be, which is a uniter. His agenda is not a uniting agenda. I mean, it's just simply not. And it's a radical agenda, and everything from his tax policy, which he now will not be able to pass, to his regulatory policy, to his climate policy, to his energy policy, to all of those things are very, very, very radical. And so he has an opportunity to reach out to Republicans and in fact unify it. He came with the Obama-Biden administration. Everybody talks about how divisive Donald Trump is. Let me assure you, Barack Obama was every bit as divisive as Donald Trump when it came to the way he dealt with people in Washington on policy, and frankly, interpersonally. He's a very smooth and cool, and I mean he's got a great character traits for someone who looks the part, but he didn't play the part. He weaponized the government against conservatives on so many occasions, never did it publicly, probably never said it privately, or at least on record. But he was a pretty divisive character. He's a community organizer, but a very smart one. Joe's not that clever. Joe's not that driven ideologically. I always say, I gave an interview for CNN, actually a long one on Joe Biden. And I said, in reflecting on Joe Biden, Joe's a guy who always steers the course of the middle of the river of his party. He just wants to stay in the middle, wherever that it can bend to the right, can bend to the left. Joe's gonna navigate to the middle to be safe. And so he now has an opportunity to navigate the party in a little different direction, because I don't know if too many, I mean, obviously, the left. I mean, the left says, well, if we didn't win, it's because we weren't radical enough. Joe didn't win because he didn't push for the Green New Deal, or didn't push for Medicare for all. That's what they believe. Now, nothing would lend a reasonable person believe that, but they don't care. They believe in their cause. If there's anything I've learned about the left, they are as passionate about their politics as you and I are about our faith, because it is their religion, and they have religious zeal in fighting for and believing the justness of their cause. So Biden has an opportunity to refashion the Democratic Party. Will he take it? I hope so. I hope that he can be a uniter, and you can't be a uniter just by saying, oh, I like everybody and I'll talk to everybody. You have to be a uniter by actually listening to the other side, taking some of their ideas and melding it together in something that can actually get bipartisan votes. And unless you're willing to do that, and that means tick off the left wing of your party, then you're not a uniter. You may sound like one, you may say all the right things. Barack Obama said all the right things. He did all the wrong things. And so let's see. But had Republicans lost the Senate, Joe would have been a toxic figure and would have been I think a very, very divisive president. Now he has an opportunity not to be that. We'll see if he takes advantage of it.
Well, thank you. I want to thank you for being with us, Rick. Always one of my favorite people. That's why I was so in on well, Karen's going to kill me, but on Santorum 24, I'll come and work the campaign.
Yes,
but
she will kill you.
Who do you think, just real quick, just 10 seconds, who do you think is the future of the party to run in 24?
There are more and more Republicans. John, you know this because we're close, but I wrote this book back in 2014, which I think. I don't want to pat myself too hard on the back here, but I think was sort of the Bible for Donald Trump. It's a book I wrote called Blue Collar Conservative, Recommitting to an America That Works. And it talked about manufacturing, and it talked about blue collar issues, and it talked about trade and China and all of the things that Trump has, I think, appropriately, immigration has appropriately focused on. And because they're blue collar values. That's whether we like it or not, we know it now. But 4 years ago, 8 years ago, when I was doing this, People didn't know that the Republican Party had changed. They didn't admit to it. They didn't recognize it. But the future of our party is who votes for us. And who votes for us? It's not the people with money. If there's anything we learned from this election, the money is and will be on the Democratic side. Why? Because two reasons. Number one, the people who are making the most money in America right now are highly educated, highly skilled college graduates who have been indoctrinated in colleges around and universities around this country, live on the coast in California and in Boston and in North Carolina and Philadelphia. They are incredibly wealthy. I mean, beyond the wealth, of anybody, any business elites 50 years ago when they were Republican. All of these people are incredibly wealthy, and they're super liberal. Same thing with because tech rewards the workforce with stock and other things. There's wealth spread throughout big tech and other tech and biotech and other types of technologies, which are all left. And a lot of these employees, it's not the Bezoses, and it's not the Gates, it's not the Dorseys. It's the the Kims and the Abadis and the Smiths who work at big tech. They are wealthy too, incredibly wealthy. And so the amount of wealth the left now has dwarfs the right. That was not the case 20 years ago. So wealth is accumulated among the hardcore left. And that's why they outspent Republicans, ready for this, 3-1 in congressional elections. We kept the Senate, we kept the House, and we were outspent horribly by the left. Here's the other reason I mentioned the accumulation of wealth. The other reason is they have a huge mechanism to get small dollar donors. And it goes back to the point I made earlier. Republicans, blue collar working people, are people of faith. They go to church, they belong to a church by and large. They have families, they have children. That's where they spend their money, on their family, on their church, and on their community. The left, all of these people, they don't believe in God, most of them. They don't have children, and their church is politics. And that's where they give their money. And they have it. So they have money, and this is their religion. And so I want to prepare us that the new Republican Party is going to be a poor party. We are not going to have the money the other side's going to have. We're not going to have the big donors giving to the dark money PACs, and we're not going to have the small dollar donors who were funding guys like Jamie Harrison to the tune of $100 million in the state of South Carolina. So we have to, how we win is to do what Donald Trump is to have leaders of our party who are committed to working with, talking to, identifying with, and proposing policies to working men and women in this country who, up until Donald Trump, believed neither party cared about them. They believed Republicans cared about businesses and corporations, and and Democrats who were elitist, who cared about climate change and abortion and gay rights. So we have an opportunity, but it is not the path that I suspect even people listening to this call, who are mostly probably not blue collar people, they might find that a little uncomfortable. But these blue collar people, these are the people who share our values. And these are people who love America, not for what Barack Obama and Joe Biden and AOC wants to transform it into, but actually this common shared values that made this country the greatest country in the history of the world. And we need to embrace them. And we need to make sure they feel like they're part of the American dream and that they're participating in it. So we have to be much more conscious about that if we're going to be successful. And I think that is so consistent with how the Catholic faith and our responsibility, preferential options for the poor, and making sure that we're caring for our neighbor who is struggling. I think we are. I guess my point is, the future leaders, I think, are going to probably be more Catholic than we've seen in the Republican Party going forward.
That's a great point. Thank you, Rick, so much for coming, for sharing your wisdom with us. This summer at Napa, we'll be talking a lot about that. The theme of the conference is All Things Made New. And we'll be talking about politics, economics, Catholics' role in renewing America and renewing the church at the same time, but really our role in healing this great divide we're talking about here. I'm sure Rick will be there to join us. If not, I'll come fly and pick you up and bring you up. Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future. Thanks, Rick.
Thanks. All right.